Mitchell has his head up, takes the feet. Oh, my! Donovan!
Get that weak stuff out of here!
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod. I'm your host, Tony Pesta, joined by Jackson Flickinger. You can find all of our work for Write Down Euclid and Fear the Sword in the description below. The Cleveland Cavaliers can't stop winning. They have rattled off 8 consecutive wins, most of which coming in dominant fashion. Jackson, after another game where the Cavaliers didn't trail for even a single second, what are your thoughts on this team right now?
I mean, they are just playing some great basketball, the best basketball of the season. They are coming out and just setting the tone early, taking advantage of those teams that are coming off of the second end of a back-to-back, just really never giving them a chance to breathe. Just great basketball.
Yeah, I tweeted this, but I really haven't been this lost for words about the Cavs since that 2022 around this time in January where they were just decimating teams. It's not that they're just beating teams, because granted, their schedule has lightened up. They've had an easier schedule than what we saw at the beginning of the year. And normally when you beat those lesser opponents, you don't take too much from it, but they're not just beating teams. They are eviscerating teams start to finish. We've seen the Cavs at times. Every NBA team does this. They have sluggish starts. They don't come out really firing off the gate.
Shout out to John Beeline.
Yeah. But there's no slugs over here anymore because the Cavs, I don't know this off the top of my head, but I want to say they've led by 20 points in the first half of their last 4 games, maybe even more than that. They're just, it's not even a contest. It's been really nice writing the recap for these games because I could start doing it in the third quarter and, there's no dramatic affairs at the end. But yeah, I mean, I'm lost for words with how well they've been playing.
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of like the comparison to the 2022 season. What I think is kind of different is we kind of knew that team wasn't that good, especially because
we knew
by this point,
their ceiling was a little lower.
Right, but especially at this point, they already lost Rubio and Sexton for the season. So it was like somebody needs to dribble, and that was when we were doing the Brandon Goodwin's
Rondo
coming in and stealing a game, and then Rondo, LeBron's doing the Cavs a favor by sending Rondo over. So so it was kind of like you were really optimistic because of how good Evan Mobley was, but you kind of had that feeling that they're not the third best team in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah. Like I said, the ceiling was just a lot lower back then. It just felt like found money at that point, but the Cavs have been playing out of their minds, and as the legend of Sam Merrill continues to grow, I'd have to imagine Jackson's ego is also growing because he told us before everybody, we're going to keep giving him credit for it. But Jackson, we all know at this point, Sam Merrill can flat out shoot the ball. It's been covered enough. Let's talk about his longevity in the NBA, his permanent role with this team, and really what I want to know is what is it going to take for Sam Merrill to be a permanent member of this rotation, even when the Cavs are at full strength?
I think just more opportunities is what's really going to do it for him. One of the things that I got a chance to talk to Sam a lot last year when he was with the Charge, and one of the things he kept mentioning is that throughout his career, he hasn't gotten a chance to just have consistent minutes and really show what he can do. And that's why he really liked the opportunity with the Charge, because he could actually get minutes. He was selected 60th overall in 2022. He played on the Bucks the year they won the title, and he wasn't really getting any minutes because he was on a championship level team. And then the next year, he gets included in a trade to the Memphis Grizzlies, and he was starting to get minutes, but really in the beginning of the year, he tore his ACL. So he was gone for the year. I'm not sure if it was an ACL injury, but it was a year-ending injury. So he didn't, he never got a chance to show what he could do there. And then the following year, he goes into training camp with the Kings, and then Mike Brown chooses Delly over him. So really, he's just never gotten an opportunity to show what he can do. And I think one of the things that you go on when you first see Sam Merrill play is you're like, wow, this guy can really shoot the ball. That's cool. Too bad he can't do anything else besides shoot. And then you're like, well, the more you see him, you're like, well, the way he moves off balls just helps everybody else. Too bad he can't do anything else. And then you're like, well, actually, he can he's not finishing at the rim, but he can dribble and he can pass and he can use his movement to kind of just create for other people. And then you're like, well, but he can't hold up on defense. And then you're like, well, I don't know if he's a good defender.
That one might be true, but it's yet to be seen still.
No, the thing is, he does we're not going to say, hey, Sam, why don't you guard Dame tomorrow? But what you're going to do is, when he's on the floor, he puts himself in positions where he's not getting picked on. You never watching him play and you're like, oh no, they're attacking Sam Merrill again. Cause we've seen Kevin Love. How many times have we seen Kevin Love out there playing good? And then the other team's like, all right, we're just going to target Kevin Love and play him off the floor. I think of that play in against the Hawks. Obviously they're not playing Sam Merrill in a game that big, but even when he's playing, it's not like teams aren't trying to go after him. They're just not really getting him in these isolation situations. So, and there's a reason why. It's not because teams aren't trying. It's because he does a good job of seeing it before teams can actually put him in those spots. So one of the things that I think is really interesting is that throughout his career, at least his professional career, teams have always said, this is a shorter white guy. He doesn't have great athleticism. Let's target him. And he's when he first came into the league, he kind of was getting targeted like that. But as he's progressed, he's found out how to avoid those situations. So is he someone who's you're going to be closing games with? I don't think he's going to be closing games, but I don't think he's going to get played off the floor in a lot of different, in a lot of his matchups, because unlike somebody like Jetty, I think is a really good example of somebody who got played off the floor against the Knicks last year because of his defense. Well, Jetty coming up, he's always been a 6'7" wing who, when he plays for his national team, he's one of the better players. No one's picking on him. When he's playing in bench lineups, no one's trying to pick on him. It's only in these high leverage spots. And guys like that aren't used to navigating out of those situations because it's not something that they've done their whole lives. Sam Merrill, he's been targeted his whole life. He has a lot of experience with this. So I think that's kind of, when you watch him, watch how he doesn't let himself get caught up in that switch. Or if he does, he really hedges hard to try to stay up on the guy so that they're not getting threes over him. One of the things that you think of with Kevin Love is that when he's decides to stop, which, that kind of makes up for everything. But one of the things when you would see Kevin Love get switched on to a guy on the perimeter is he kind of would want to not play him super tight because he's scared of getting beat back. He's scared of getting beat to the basket and he just doesn't want that. Sam is Sam, whenever he gets switched on to someone, he's I'm going to not let them take a three. And if somebody wants to try to take me off the dribble, I know that the defense behind me is going to be able to rotate over to cover for me. And I'm going to be able to provide enough resistance where he's not just completely blowing by without any resistance at all. So if you can do those things, you can survive. I'm not as concerned as whether you can hold up on the defense as, say, Chris Manning in our Fear the Sword group chat, who's very concerned. So that's where I'm I get it because we've all thought it, but he's better than you think.
Yeah. And you brought up a fantastic point that I want to really focus on too, which not just his positional awareness and the way that he manages to keep himself out of being in bad positions, but when he is in those isolation situations or he's not afraid of being beat off the dribble, as you said. And what I think is really, really important, and everyone should watch for this, what I've noticed is he's very good at passing his man off to Jarrett Allen into the help defense and then immediately finding where his rotation is. There's a clip that I have in my mind. I can't think of exactly when it was. I'll try to include it here for YouTube. But there's one clip that I was watching recently where he knew he got beat. He helped funnel his man to Allen, immediately turns around, finds his man in the corner, his next rotation. And that's the type of thing where if you talk about Jetty or Kevin Love, they probably don't make that second rotation as quickly, if at all. That's where you end up getting these wide open swing passes for 3-pointers. Like, the important thing with Merrill, he might not be the most athletically gifted player. He might not be very great at the point of attack, but he works hard. He's smart. And the reason why that's important is because if you're difficult to pick on, teams aren't going to go out of their way to drain the shot clock to try and get you involved in actions if you're going to make them work really hard to do it. If you're going to head screens early, if you're going to funnel your man into the right positions on the floor, it just really isn't worth it for a team to go through the process of trying to get you involved in every action if you're working that hard. So when it comes to a playoff series, I think really I don't see any reason why Sam Merrill shouldn't be a permanent member of the rotation at this point, even if it means the Cavs have to play a little smaller, which is something I think we both have talked about in the past. The other thing that I want to talk about with Merrill, and you can chime in with any other takes you have too, but I've been impressed with his passing, genuinely. I don't think he's like a insane playmaker or anything like that, but not only is he a really good shooter, but he doesn't fall into that stereotype of just being a good shooter. He knows how to move off ball, and that's like an entirely different skill than just shooting. Not to throw shade, this isn't a diss at all at Emoni Bates, but you look at someone like Emoni Bates, and it's like, yeah, he can shoot the ball really well, but he doesn't move without the ball as well. Sam Merrill does both of those things, and he's not good at getting into the paint, but when you have defenders scrambling to close out to you because you're moving around the perimeter, it doesn't matter if you're a good finisher or not. If you get the ball into the paint, a defense is going to collapse, and he has shown at least an adequate ability to make the extra pass, whether it's a dump off or a kick out to the 3-point line. So I think there's a lot of, I won't say untapped potential, but I think there's a lot more to Merrill's game than people are really realizing. And as he gets more opportunity, we'll see more and more of that start to show.
Yeah, I think what he does have, he has a really good awareness of the game, and like he knows where everyone else is. He knows where all other 9 guys are. Like he knows where the help's coming from, and he's able to like just get rid of it super quickly. Like he's not somebody who's like, oh, he has great velocity on his passes, or he's just like a really good, taking people in pick and roll situations. But what he does is he just has a really good ability to just read what's happening and like react right away. So like he makes up for his like lack of athleticism by just like processing really fast. And I think it's something that's hard to really talk about unless you watch somebody a lot, like how fast they're processing the game. Like he just knows where the pass needs to go, where the open guy is. And I think we see this a lot with when he's playing with Tristan, like when he's coming across those screens from him, he like before he gets the ball, he knows whether he needs to be going up with it or whether this is a pass off to Tristan, or this is I'm going to catch it, throw it back to the guy who passed it to me, and I'm going to move again and try to get an open shot that way.
Great basketball instincts. I agree 100%. And there's another guy who is flashing some great basketball instincts who I think we all knew he had, but let's talk about Donovan Mitchell. He dished out 13 assists for the second time this season, matching a career high for a single game. He's averaging a career high in assists this season, and he's been dealing nearly 8 a game since Darius Garland went down with an injury. That's the 10th most in the NBA during this stretch, and Mitchell is one of just 4 players averaging 28 points and 7 assists since mid-December. All the while, his turnovers during this time would be at a career low at just over 2.5 per game. So, Jackson, what are your thoughts on point guard Donovan Mitchell?
I really like what I'm seeing from Donovan. And one of the things that it reminds me of is it reminds me of those Jazz teams that he was on where they would just space the floor and then they would have, Rudy Gobert to clean everything up on the defensive end. But I think Donovan is a little more, I think he's progressing his game just a little bit, that he makes it work just a little bit better. And this team has a lot better defenders 1 through 5 than I think any of those Jazz teams did. Even if they don't have the shooters, they, like the Jazz didn't have an Isaac Okoro or Dean Wade out there with them all the time. And I think that really makes a difference. So I think Donovan still has some flaws as a playmaker. He doesn't have great touch in getting the ball to Allen. He's not like a Darius Garland who's like manipulating the pick and roll or his defender with these like hesitation dribbles. But what he's doing a really good job of is he's recognizing the double team before it gets there, and he's throwing it to Allen before that can happen. One of the things that I've really seen is that like he's getting the ball to Allen before coming around the screen completely. Like if he catches it and he starts to go around it and he sees that the defense is stepping up, he's throwing it down to Allen before kind of getting to the free throw line, which is not something that we've seen from him in the past, where in the past he would get around there, and then once he would get around there, he's either passing it to the corner or just taking it up himself. So that's where I've seen improvement, is just kind of being more aware of where those double teams are coming from. And I think that's a lot easier when there's more space out there, because a lot of times in those situations where you have Allen and Mobley's in the dunker spot in that situation. And then that makes it just that much harder to process things, I think. So that's where I've really liked where Donovan Mitchell has developed as a playmaker. But I think that there's reason to be skeptical about how this is all going to translate once Mobley's back.
Sure, I definitely agree with that. He's having a very great playmaking stretch, but as you mentioned, he's still not really the best at that interior passing. He's more of a drive and kick type of player. But the thing that has impressed me is just kind of his control of the game and really just his willingness to get rid of the ball, whether it be giving it to Allen a little bit earlier. And because of that, we're seeing what Allen can do with the ball in his hands rather than just setting screens. He is now an active member of the offense. He has the ball. He can hand it off, or he can attack on his own. That's opened up a lot of the game for everyone on this team. And it all starts with Mitchell giving the ball up himself. So I think that's been the most impressive thing to me, is just the fact that he has bought into being more of a playmaker, and he's doing it really well up to this point.
I want to just jump off of that real quick, is that when the floor is more spaced out, you kind of see his skill as a passer. He's a really, like he has a lot of zip on his ball when he's passing it out to the perimeter. And when it's more spaced out, he's able to kind of showcase that skill. Like that one pass he had to Wade or Niang against the Bucks, where it was
Niang, yep.
Yeah, there was just a crazy pass.
Insane.
And
Yeah.
it's like, that's what, when it's more spaced out, like that's his forte as a passer. It's not like I don't think Darius has that skill as a passer. Like I don't see him as somebody who has a lot of zip on his passes, where like it's just spraying it everywhere to the perimeter. What Darius does well is he finds his little pockets to get it to Mobley or Allen up top. And that's what Donovan doesn't have at all. But this more spaced out version, he's just been phenomenal. And I kind of want to see him like with the second unit when everyone's back, like with Allen and kind of this type of team around him. I think that would be like allowing him to kind of take this and do it into like, 10, 15 minutes a game.
Yeah. And I don't want to jump ahead to the return of Garland and Mobley, but I do want to mention something on that point, is that when Garland and Mobley do return, the Cavs can still play this brand of basketball in spurts. You're not going to have the starters playing that entire game together. So you will still have moments where you can have Mitchell spaced out with a bunch of shooting, and hopefully every lesson that they've learned right now carries over into when they're fully healthy. But yeah, I mean, Mitchell playing with this space, I think he's done a great job of picking and choosing his own shots. He's doing a really, really good job of manipulating in that space. His crossover, his sham god dribble is just unreal, the way he gets the whole defense going one way and then somehow brings it right back. And now all of a sudden the opposite corner is open. And he's just doing a great job of finding the open shooter.
There's just not many people in the league who put that much rim pressure from the point guard's position. Like when he drives, everyone has to collapse because you can't guard him one-on-one. At least most teams can't guard him one-on-one. So that's something that really very few point guards in the league can do. Even you're thinking about the best ones, they're not putting that much pressure on the rim. So when he puts that much pressure on the rim, it's like Dean Wade has time to take a drink of coffee before he puts a shot up, because it's just, there's nobody near him. So that's that's one of the things that I think is like really impressive. And you're just like, whoa, like that level of being able to bend a defense is just not something that, you see often.
Yeah. I wouldn't put Donovan Mitchell in the MVP conversation, but I do think the way he's responded to what the team needs from him, it's been really special. And I think that it should be getting a whole bunch of attention from everyone who loves basketball, because there's just not many point guards or just players of Donovan Mitchell's size who put that much pressure on the rim, who are that good of shooting off the dribble. And now he's doing it with the playmaking too, while also being a pretty good defender as of late. I think we've said this a couple of times, but Mitchell's been solid on defense this year.
I think the defense is a really interesting conversation, because I think the defense is worth a deep dive at some point, but it's really interesting how the Cavs are playing. Like, they're not playing the same type of defense that they were with the two bigs. There's a lot more accountability. They're helping a lot less, and they're only helping from one side. And it's just a lot different. And I think this type of defense kind of suits Donovan Mitchell more, whereas a defense that's always kind of like Allen and Mobley are always crashing the basket to like protect, kind of allows you to get lazy, knowing that like it doesn't matter if I get beat, I have Allen and Mobley there to clean things up. So I think it just kind of like forces him to use his skills on that end. And he has an incredible, I don't have his wingspan off the top of my head, but it's insane.
Nuts.
That's why he's able to do that whatever that's called, that dribble.
The one-hand rebound?
Yeah. Well, yeah, the one-hand rebound and like the dribble over.
Oh, yeah.
Like the
I don't know what
that's
called
people.
either, but I know what you're talking about.
And that's like Craig Porter Jr. is always like, I want to try that. And it's like, yeah, well, you're like 6'2". So and you have 6'2" arms. You don't have like 7-foot arms. So you can't.
He doesn't have that Spider-Man reach.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's why he's able to get away with making bad shoes.
That I buy, apparently.
Not apparently.
Yeah, I think we should do a full deep dive into their defense at some point here soon, because it's not just that when you have Allen and Mobley there that it's like, well, if I get beat, they have my back. But it's also the more you have to rotate as a defense, like each new rotation you have to make is just another, the gap for you to have a breakdown. It just opens up wider and wider, because most teams can make one rotation. Once you do 2, 3, whatever, like there's gonna be a hole somewhere in your defense. And so having an individual accountability and not forcing everyone on the defensive end to rotate when someone is defending in isolation, it just makes all the difference. And I do think, I think that's why you're seeing Donovan Mitchell get a lot of steals too, because he's just great at playing the passing lane. And when he's not out of position and help, he's able to dive into those passing lanes and come up with, where is he in terms of steals? Is he number one?
He was second last week, so I haven't checked.
He had 4, I think, against Orlando, right? So
he may be getting up there. But one of the things that I think is, I was listening to the Chasedown, and they're big people they're big fans of like shooting luck, and we've talked about this a lot. I don't believe in 3-point shooting luck, at least not over a large sample size. Like one game, I believe in 3-point shooting luck, but like, over 10, 15, 20 games, kind of, if teams keep shooting well against you, it's because you're allowing them to shoot well against you. And one of the things that you're seeing during the stretch is that teams are not shooting well from 3 against the Cavs. And it's just because they're not making those rotations the same way. They're staying on the guys that they need to stay on. And it just makes a huge difference.
Well, teams just aren't shooting well in general against the Cavs too. So on top of that, I just want to highlight, it's been 4 games in a row under 100 points. This Cavs team, as we said at the top, you just can't exaggerate how well they're playing right now.
Right. And it's not a fluke. Like, it's not like, oh, like, this guy, we gave him 4 or 5 open threes and he just missed them all. It's like, no, they're not
suffocating. As Jarrett Allen coined the term, they're suffocating the opponents.
Yeah. Like, they're not giving up open shots. They're making, like, especially that like first quarter, it was like, there was this one stretch where like Paolo had like a contested mid-range jumper at like 2 seconds left in the shot clock, and like they worked for 20 seconds to get that shot. And it's like, Yeah, they're just, like that's not like the defense. Like, I don't want to say the Cavs defense hasn't been good because it has been good, but it's more so been good because Mobley's a freak and able to just cover up everything. Like, nobody has two legit shot blockers on the floor at all times. But this defense is a lot more like connected. Well, like connected, I think is a good way to say. Because like when we talked about everyone's like, oh, the Cavs got bullied against the Knicks, and they did, but they had to overhelp because they were just not. There was no integrity on the perimeter, so it's like they were overhelping. Like, they didn't need to help as much as they did, but them overhelping, every time you step up to help, your guy slips behind. So it's like that's why Mitchell Robinson was able to get so many rebounds because nobody was there.
So, yeah, I mean, the Cavs have been playing great. We are going to talk about what the return of Garland and Mobley is going to look like and what that means. But I do want to get into some news here very quickly before we round out the episode with that Garland and Mobley discussion. 2 different members of the Cavs have been suspended here recently. Tristan Thompson has been suspended by the NBA for 25 games after failing a drug test. And you know what? It kind of all makes sense now. TT was having one hell of a comeback season after being on SportsCenter for a year. And, the fact that he's been on PEDs, I guess, isn't all that shocking, all things considered. But in all seriousness, I do think it's unfortunate. Not only was Thompson having a good year, but I just think it's important we keep, mental health in mind and understand what would lead a player or an aging athlete like Thompson to go down that path in the first place. The fact that he felt like he needed to use that, it's unfortunate. So I really am wishing him all the best. And I also thought it was unfortunate that some Cavs fans on Twitter were kind of taking victory laps about this. But Jackson, what's your take on the Tristan Thompson news?
It's unfortunate, especially this time, because the Cavs, when a Mobley returns, I don't think Tristan was going to have a spot in the rotation just because, you don't need 3 centers. So kind of the timing of it is unfortunate, but it's also kind of disappointing because Tristan was one of the best stories of the year for the Cavs. Just his resurgence, we thought that when he was signed that like he was just here to be like this team's James Jones, but no, he was here to play basketball and be a really good basketball player. Like, he's been really helpful, especially with that second unit. We talked a lot about what Sam Merrill's able to do. A lot of that has to do with Tristan's screen setting, like his ability to just take away space from defenders has really opened up Sam Merrill and really that whole second unit. So he's just been phenomenal, and it is a little disappointing. I hope that, I think it's a good point that you brought up with the mental health. I don't think I'm eloquent enough to speak on that topic, but I think it's important to keep that in mind when you talk about things like this, because this is something that I'm sure it was a choice to go down this route, and hopefully he's okay from that standpoint. And, I think these next stretch of games that the Cavs have before Evan Mobley returns are going to be really interesting because they really need what Tristan provides, especially, Damian Jones hasn't looked very good this year when he's been given real minutes. He's looked good in garbage time, and the Cavs have gotten a lot of garbage time. So it's given him a lot of time to kind of get some reps in, and he's looked good, but it's different playing against like actual meaningful basketball. But he's going to be the guy that they're going to be relying on. I don't think I've seen people float that maybe they play Dean Wade at the 5. Well, let me tell you something. Dean Wade is kind of like a 3-4. He's not a 4-5. Definitely not a 5. George Niang, definitely not a 5. Like he just can't rebound enough.
Yeah, he's not a rebounder.
Like, even there were some games where the good Cavs teams would try to play Kevin Love at the 5, and you could kind of get away with it just because he could rebound. Like, he wasn't protecting the rim or anything, but he was rebounding. And it's like George Niang and Dean Wade aren't that level of rebounders. So you can't even you can't even entertain that for like a 3-minute stretch, just because if you can't rebound and you can't defend the first action, then what choice? It's not going to go well.
Not only that, but like if we're talking replacing Tristan, like Tristan's value is the offensive rebounding, and Niang and Dean Wade are going to be on the 3-point line. They're not going to be down there putting pressure on the offensive glass. So it's really a big blow. Never thought I would say that about Tristan Thompson in 2023, but losing him for 25 games, especially with Mobley out, it's going to hurt. It's not something that they can't overcome, but it's definitely not ideal. The other suspension that we have is Emoni Bates. I believe there's 2 games, right?
Yes, so he's already served 1 game.
Yeah, so he has been suspended for really, as far as I can tell. There was a fan in the opposing team's crowd that was heckling him. Sounds like this fan said something very disrespectful. So Emoni and another charged player entered the stands to confront this person. It's hard to see on the video, and I haven't really heard all the details, but it doesn't seem like there was any physical altercations or anything like that. It just seemed like Emoni approached him and they had a conversation. Now, immature decision, the wrong decision to enter the stands, but I'm hoping that this is maybe just a small moment that is easy to move on from. But what is your take on this whole ordeal?
I think it's telling that it's only a 2-game suspension and we didn't hear anything about it for like 2 days. So I don't think it's something I think there's like an inclination to be like, oh, this is just like Kevin Porter. This is just like a Kevin Porter Jr. situation where like some of the bad Kevin Porter Jr. situations happened off the court in a very like serious way and were much more serious allegations than going into this. Like when you watch the video, he's not running. Like
I saw people mentioning Malice in the Palace, and then you watch the video and he's just like taking a stroll up to like be like, hey, what's up, man?
From JB had some quotes about it yesterday. It sounds like this was probably more the fault of the guy who was saying things in the stand and was not saying things that are appropriate at all. So I don't think this is worth making a big fuss about. And he was actually like, if you look at the video, it all took place in about like 25 seconds. Like it looked like he was dribbling it out. The buzzer sounded. He started to slowly take steps towards the baseline, towards out of bounds. Then it cuts away, and then you can see like the coaches in the background kind of point to what's happening, but they weren't like, oh no, Emoni's like punching people in the stands. It was just kind of like, I don't think Emoni should be like 2 rows back. And that's where, and then it was like, by the time they kind of went to cut over there, he was already back on the charge bench. So, which was on the other side of the court. So it's like, I don't think this isn't worth making a big deal about, or this isn't like, I don't even think this is like Emoni needs to show more maturity, because if this was an NBA game, there's a lot more security that's
he wouldn't have made it up to the stands.
Well, he wouldn't have made it up there, but I don't think the fan would have been able to get away with saying the things that they did.
Yeah, he would have been approached.
So I don't think this is like this isn't a stain on his resume, and I think if you use it as such, that's foolish, and you're doing your own confirmation bias.
Yeah, I actually agree 100%. Like I said, was it the right decision? Probably not. But to me, this sounds like he probably got suspended just as a technicality of like, hey, you can't go into the stands. It doesn't seem like anything bad actually happened. I don't think it's a stain on his resume, and I don't want to speculate, but I have heard that the person in the stands was actually Mac Perry asking Emoni to come on the It's Cavalier pod. So maybe it wasn't bad after all. But no, in all seriousness, I mean, like I said with Tristan Thompson, it's like, I think sometimes we got to remember that athletes are human, and you can't just say whatever you want because you're in the stands and expect not to have an effect on someone. And clearly Emoni felt that a line was crossed, and he talked to the fan. You know, people talk about immaturity, but like, in a way, the way he handled it was kind of mature. I mean, he didn't rush the stands. He didn't get into a fight. We don't know what was said between the two, but not making too big of a deal out of this one. I did want to address it though, because obviously Twitter is Twitter, and the news broke and everyone went wild. So now let's bring this back to the Cavaliers and discuss what is on everyone's mind. Jackson, are the Cavaliers actually better without their best players? I'm just kidding. Garland and Mobley will be back in the fold soon. And with how well the Cavs are playing, I kind of understand why some fans are worried about tinkering with what's going on. But what is the key to bringing back both Mobley and Garland? You can pick either one and we'll start from there.
I think there's been a change on both ends of the court that affect both players in different ways. I think one of the things that this stretch has showed us is that this coaching staff is able to adapt on the fly, which is good. And I think that they will have to adapt again, obviously, because rotations are going to change. The style of play is going to change. You're going to go from kind of a very rangy team to a very small backcourt, big front court with Max Strus out there as well. So that kind of, it's just different personnel, and different personnel require different things. I think it's a lot easier to get into the mindset of, okay, we need to be emphasizing the 3-pointers that we're taking and the movement when you've been sitting at home for a month watching this play out. I think it's a lot easier to get buy-in from that standpoint, not saying that Darius or Evan weren't bought into what the Cavs were trying to do. But one of the things that I think is always important to keep in mind is that, especially with young players, and Darius is still 23, which is still the same age as Greg Porter Jr., and, you know, he's still a young guy. When you talk about players that are that age, a lot of times the skills that get you into the NBA or into a lottery pick aren't the skills that you need to take the next step as a team and as a player. Not saying that they both need to just radically alter their game, but they will need to come in and kind of adjust how they play to how this team's currently playing, because you can't see this incredible run that the Cavs are on and say, nothing needs to change about my game. Everyone needs to adjust to me, because clearly things weren't working beforehand. And I have faith that they can do that, because I think that they're both incredibly talented basketball players. And I think they're both willing to do what's best for the team. And I think it's a lot easier to do that when you see that, hey, this actually does work. I'm going to have to adjust how I've been playing. And I think they'll do that.
Yep. This was a proof of concept if I've ever seen one. I don't doubt that both Garland and Mobley want to buy into whatever's going to help the team the most. And I think this team's culture, I know culture gets thrown around a lot, but it seems like they're going to hold each other accountable. And when Garland and Mobley do return, they're going to try and play similar to how they're playing now. There's going to be necessary adjustments. But I do think that it's important to note that the way the Cavs are currently playing is more or less how they wanted to play all season, how they talked during the offseason and what their goal was. They tried to play this way, but they ran into, I think, a combination of growing pains, some constant injuries. I mean, even before the big injuries to Garland and Mobley, you had hamstrings, shooting hand, like just a whole bunch of different stuff that was going on.
Allen missed the first 8 games,
Yep.
something like that.
And he was far from himself when he returned.
Yes.
And on top of all that, they just had some poor shooting, which I'm not even saying it's shooting luck, but they just weren't shooting the ball very well. So this is how they've always wanted to play.
Sam Merrill.
Yeah, they were. It's true. They didn't.
They
hadn't discovered Sam Merrill. Jackson had discovered Sam Merrill, but the Cavs.
Yeah, I did.
The Cavs still hadn't figured it out.
Right. Yeah.
But this is how they wanted to play. They didn't stumble into this style accidentally. I've seen a lot of people. I'm becoming the JB defender, but I've seen a lot of people saying like JB thinks he's smarter than he really is, and he accidentally found out how to play modern basketball. It's like this is how they wanted to play. It's just now finally coming into shape.
Right. In the preseason, he said that he wanted his team to take 53s.
Yeah.
Like they were fully healthy.
They're close to it. I think they're
right.
They're like 43, 44 threes a game, something like that off the top of my head.
Took like 30 something last night.
So
against
the numbers
stopped,
could have changed, but
they stopped like shooting at like the third quarter. Yeah. Sam didn't want to rub it in. Yeah.
Sam could have broke an NBA record. Does he have the G League record for threes?
I don't know. He has 10 in a game, which is a lot.
Okay. I know he has the summer league record. He's got to be close to the G League record.
I mean,
If he can get that NBA record, hey, how many people can say that? Nobody.
The trifecta, really.
Yeah. But no, when it comes to getting Garland and Mobley back in the fold, I do think some of the concerns are funny when you talk about, like, is this offense going to work? Because, like, listen, Darius Garland is a lot better offensively than Okoro and Dean Wade combined. I would even say Mobley. Yeah. Even Mobley is much better than both of those players combined. So it's like, I get that the fit isn't the same, but it's like they're playing this way with Okoro and Wade out there. You put Garland back into the fold, one of the best floor generals. You put Mobley in there, who is a very skilled offensive player. He may not be all-star caliber with his offense, but he's still a very good offensive player. He brings a different dynamic to that. And so they should be able to make it work. The key is going to be moving the ball. And that, again, starts with Garland. He's near the top of the league in dribbles per touch. And I mean, he's the point guard, so it's understandable, but needs to get that ball out of his hands quicker. There needs to be motion off the ball. And really, the return of Garland just raises their ceiling offensively, I think. So I'm not overly concerned. There's going to be an adjustment period, but I think that this is a good thing. If I can be bold, I think the return of Garland and Mobley is going to be an overwhelmingly good thing.
One thing I will say is that, like, the Cavs' problems, especially like last year, even in the regular season, they didn't come with the 5 guys out there on the court together. It came when one of them would sit, they would kind of fall apart. Like, the bench didn't really have an identity. So I think from that standpoint, it's not really like, I think it's easy to kind of overblow it to a certain degree because, yes, they do need to adjust, but it's also like the starting lineup was pretty fine for the most part, especially like even in the Knicks series, the starting lineup, they won those minutes with the starting lineup out there. It's just they got murdered when, they had to face Obi Toppin. That's when things went off the rails. So, like, there will be an adjustment and there will be patience, but like they can still, all these bench units are still going to play the same style. I think if you wanted to, one thing I think is worth keeping an eye on is how Caris LeVert fits into all of this. I think Caris LeVert has been a big beneficiary of being like the lead ball handler in a lot of these bench lineups. So how does that look when he's going to be paired with, because Garland or Mitchell are going to be out there all the time. So he's going to have to be playing with one of them. Not saying that he hasn't been okay or good with them. But I think it's that's something to kind of like, if you wanted to keep an eye on something, that's one thing I think I would keep an eye on.
Yeah. And maybe this will be an actual hot take. It's something that I mentioned in my most recent video, but like offensively speaking, Merrill fits better next to one of Garland or Mitchell than LeVert does. LeVert's a better player. Maybe we see Merrill in those minutes a little bit more. I don't know how the rotation is going to be split up. It's a whole mess. It's an impossible job to figure out where they're going to allocate those minutes.
I can figure it out.
You got it?
Yeah,
just play Sam Merrill.
Just play Sam Merrill. No, I think you go with a 9-man rotation. I think you go the starting 5, and then you go Merrill, LeVert, Okoro, Wade. And I think if Wade decides he just wants to do cardio out there, which sometimes he does,
then you get Niang.
Then you got to put Niang.
Niang will do cardio. He'll shoot the ball, and he'll do some yoga poses if we're lucky.
Yeah, he'll definitely do stuff. And he's playing so good right now. It
really is.
Yeah,
he's been great.
It pains me to say that.
He defended one of the Magic players in isolation yesterday and came up with a steal. It was great. I think it might have been Cole Anthony. I don't remember.
I missed that.
Oh, well, I'll make sure you see it when we're done.
I'm joking.
To wrap up my takes here on the return of Garland and Mobley, all of the lessons they have learned, it's going to remain. Whether that be them playing this exact same style with the bench lineups, or really, I think what we've seen from Allen, even like, hey, it's really good that we've seen that Allen can actually operate with the ball above the break and do some things. It's really good that Allen is like punishing drop defenders, not only just with passing and attacking the basket, but he's starting to shoot from the mid-range too. And if Evan Mobley isn't going to take those jump shots, maybe you just swap them. Mobley's in the dunker spot and Allen the one operating from the elbow now, because traditionally we've seen it the other way around. So I think the Cavs have learned a lot of things here, and it's really just going to come down to applying those to the right situations.
Right. And I think there's a lot of ways to minimize those spacing concerns if you have other off-ball movement, which is something that we've seen, especially with those bench units. Thank you, Sam Merrill. Where when there is that movement, you can't, like, if Mobley's screening for Darius Garland, who's coming off a screen, like, Mobley's defender can't be in a restricted area, because then, Garland's getting a wide open 3. So it's like, there are ways to minimize all of this. It's just, can everyone buy into that?
Yep. And the another thing that I wanted to say too is that, and you touched on this, like, we have a sample size of this core 4 working really, really well. Even in the playoffs, which was their most embarrassing moment, a lot of that came down to a lack of depth. A lot of it just came down to Darius Garland playing very poorly for much of the series. Donovan Mitchell not really playing that great. And so, listen, you take this core 4, you add Max Strus, you add a Sam Merrill, you space the floor. I think this can work. I think we've even seen at the beginning of this year sporadically, but there's that Hawks game where they just beat the brakes off of them. Hawks might not be a very good team, so I don't know how much you take from that, but they've had moments where this core looks really, really good together. I know they have overlapping talents,
even like the Nuggets game, the both Warriors games, which, speaking,
and that was before the Warriors really went off the rails, to be fair, but it may have been a sign of what
I'll leave that to you, and I'm very sorry about your Warriors.
Hey,
that's another pod,
I got off the bandwagon years ago. Shout out to Fansided for my start.
But yeah, that's, like, I think kind of one thing that all those games have in common is Darius Garland playing good. So I think one of the things that's kind of, we don't really talk about it, is I don't, like, Darius Garland wasn't right at the beginning of the year. Maybe there was a hand issue. Like, the dude was turning it over, like, every time he had the ball.
Turning it over, not shooting the
and
ball.
Not shooting.
He was not playing like the Darius Garland we know. And for that entire last year, I think most of us said, hey, this team kind of goes the way Darius Garland goes. And so the fact that now we're talking about, well, not us, but some people are saying, like, they need to move on from Darius Garland. Is bringing Darius Garland going to mess all this up? It's like, we know how, don't forget how talented Darius Garland is, and don't forget how talented Evan Mobley is. If you can't figure out a way to make it work with those two guys on the floor, that's a bigger problem than whatever they're doing.
Right. And that's what, was leading to the conversations about JB getting fired when they were 13 to 12. So, we've been there.
And we might be there again. Who knows? But overall, Cavs really turned their season around. They're on the same exact pace as they were last year. We'll see how it all goes down. We'll see what happens when Garland and Mobley return. But that is going to do it for this episode of the Junkyard Pod. Please consider hitting subscribe. Follow both of us on Twitter to keep up with all of our work. And go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs.